Greetings, everybody. It's 7:30 and welcome to Cinematic Conversations. We have a really special program for you tonight. And tonight we're talking about, you know what we're talking about because hopefully you've watched the film, a film we showed, I think the 2008 video festival called Burma VJ. And this was when we showed it, very important for me because of what it talked about in terms of video journalism and the power of video, which is kind of a major theme that I'm always talking about, is like how video has an impact on people's lives. Um, but when I started to hear, and we've been hearing for a while, about how things are changing in the area, I thought it was time to revisit this film. And being that most of what I know is about film, and what's in this film. And I am not an expert on the subject. I brought two people with me to talk about that. So we have Tommy, who is part of the Asian Film Festival. And when is the Asian Film Festival going to be, Tommy?
This year we're going to we're still kind of in COVID mode right now because our festival happens in the summer. I'm obviously the on-site operations guy, and I do it in the summer because I'm teaching. So so the option to move to October or November is not a great option. So we're going to we're going to do a small event this year, probably one night, probably going to be something drive-through-ish. We don't have any particulars nailed down because it's going to be so small. We don't have to, we're not quite on full steam yet, but we've been meeting on the regular, and we're excited to have an exciting short event for everybody this year. And then hopefully be back to as big as we can get next year, right where we left off, which would be great.
Well, Tommy, and let me offer you now publicly, we're going to have our documentary festival, DocuFest, in October. And we are happy if you have a documentary that you would like to play as Asian Film Festival Dallas presents at DocuFest. It's a great way for your audience to come and see each other face to face. And by October,
Absolutely.
and you don't have to work operations.
Thank you.
But
I do enjoy operations, though. Telling people what to do is a lot of fun. So ops is nice. But that's the plan currently, and we will keep everybody informed that are following us on Facebook and following us on social media. They'll know. They might even know before I have a good idea of it. But that's the plan right now, and it should be a pretty good plan. We got some really cool ideas planned for us. We've been sprinkling events throughout COVID here and there, collaborating with different festivals like your own. And we've still been staying as active as we can be, while meanwhile staying safe. I like to pretend we have to stay super safe because we're all super young and healthy, and we can't get the COVID vaccine, but now we can. So we're running out of excuses. So that's where we're at. But we'll definitely collaborate with you on whatever you guys have got. So just holler at me and we'll make it happen. And I'll talk to my programmer. We'll find something.
Yes. And Par is joining us, who is a student at UNT and will someday be a doctor, which is really great. So when there's something wrong with you, we know who to go to. But Par has a really fascinating story about when she was 7 years old, getting eventually to the United States. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? And first of all, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, of course. And thank you so much for inviting me. It is my pleasure to be here. So I lived in a very small rural village in Burma. It was called Zephai. And I was only 7 years old at that time. And, our country, Myanmar, it was mostly Buddhist. And so the Chin people were Christians. Through the help of missionaries, we converted, and I would say about 100%, maybe like 99% of Chin people are Christians. And so we were having a very difficult time being in that country because we were facing persecutions and things like that. And so from around that time, a lot of people were escaping out of the country, and finding refuge in different places like Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia. And my family decided that we were going to go to Malaysia as well, because my dad had already been there and he was waiting for us processing the refugee status and things like that. And it was a very hard journey. We walked thousands and thousands of miles, and we would lose our shoes, but we just had to keep running. And it was one of the experiences where, even as a child, I could never forget. There was one time, so there are these smugglers that take us from Myanmar all the way to our destination, wherever we're going to go. And so there was a situation where I think there was about 10 to 20 of us. I don't remember the exact count that they were leading. It was a small group, but there was only one truck. And they stuffed people in the back and put like fishnets over them. My brother was in the back. And then you can imagine how a truck is. There's 3 seats in the back and seats in the front. And they stuffed like 15 people in that one truck. And I was just a little girl, and I was one of the first people they shoved in. And these adults were like being shoved on top of me, and I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move. All I could do was cry. And my mom felt so bad. She started telling the driver, like, you gotta stop, I need to use the restroom. She tried to find any excuses she could because she felt so bad for me. And then they finally stopped and took us out. And then once they had us go back in, my mom like grabbed me so that they wouldn't push me in. And then I was one of the last one to go back in. And that was an experience I would never forget. It was so hard. And we didn't know the language. These smugglers, they were speaking Burmese and we speak Chin. So we didn't really understand them. They weren't doing it for because they cared about us. They were doing it for money. So they didn't want to be caught either. And they would yell at us. And if we were not fast enough, they would beat us as well. It was one of the most horrible experiences that happened. And once we get to Malaysia, you would think that we were safe, but no. There were the police there in Malaysia. They if we didn't have proper documents or anything like that, they would deport us back, and we didn't want that to happen. And they would do like these regular raids. They kind of, if people report us, or if we don't speak the language, people know that we're not from there, so they would report us and they would just do raids in these apartments. And so we would hide under beds and run. And I think we were lucky because my dad was already there for years. And we lived in Malaysia for only, I think, 7 to 8 months. And then we were able to come to the US, whereas other people, they had to live there for like 5 years, 6 years or more. So
What was it like coming to the United States?
it was very different from what I imagined. So in Myanmar, as a little girl, we always viewed the United States as like a heaven. That's what we describe it as. And I saw pictures of my dad in Malaysia, and there were like sands behind his back. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's bread. It's all bread. I can eat. And we really didn't have much to eat, just vegetables that we grew ourselves and that we farmed ourselves. So I was so excited to get to Malaysia and then America, but everything was so different from what I imagined. And then we got here, it was around Thanksgiving, Christmas time, and there were so many helpful brothers and sisters in Christ that would come and offer us food. But the first time I ever tasted a cookie, it was a bad experience. It was very sweet. We were not used to sweet things because we ate only vegetables.
Mm.
It was very sweet. And I was like, why do people like this? I don't like this. So
Wonderful, wonderful story. And it's amazing. It's like I don't remember anything from when I was 7 years old. I mean, it's truly remarkable story. So one of the first questions before we even get into the film is when did things change be called Burma and when it was Myanmar? I mean, how did this what's the story with these two names?
So Burma was the name given by the British. So we were colonized by the British at one point. And so the colony, they called it Burma. The name kind of gradually changed. Burmese people, they pronounce it Bama, like there's no like R or things like that, but
Kind of like
with the
Obama?
English name, yeah, with the English name,
Yeah.
there's R, and then in 1989, they decided to change it to Myanmar, which is the the proper name in the Burmese language. So they wanted to change the English name to a Burmese name. And they thought that it would include more of the minorities
Mhm.
in the country, but actually, not really. That's not how the minorities view it. So we view it as we're more used to the name Burma because that's what we grew up hearing. And Myanmar is more of the Burmese language, whereas we're not used to it. So even though they said it's to include the minorities, actually they're just putting their language above. They're the majority, so they're, yeah.
So one of the sort of underpinnings from I think this film and everything since then is the power that the military has in Myanmar. So how did the military get so much power? Because in most other countries, that's not necessarily the case.
In around 1962, that's when General Ne Win took over. The military really took over by force. So it became sort of a totalitarian dictatorship,
Mhm.
even though it wasn't really called that, or it was that, but on the outside, that's not what they said it was. So they continue to just be in charge of everything, like business. So they had a part of everything. And one of the things,
What's that? I'm sorry. Okay, keep going. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened.
that's all right. Um, and so I think and then in the Constitution, it says that the military has to have a certain number of, I think it's like 20% of the seats, like it's required. So
Yeah.
you can't even if you win, you still have to have the military have that 20%. So they are always there. And even when they allowed elections, the other party was kind of in with the military. So even though they were a party, they were actually controlled by the military. So they would do everything according to what the military said. And since they have gained so much riches and wealth from their position, they don't want to let that go anymore. So even though there are so many people living in poverty, they just want their own benefits, basically.
So it's clear from what you're saying that the military has so much control over everyday life. And one of the interesting elements of the film where the struggle starts to change at a certain point is when the monks actually join the protest. So if we say on one hand we have the military, which is very, very powerful, and then you have the Buddhist monks, what is their sense of the kind of influence that they have over the people of Burma or Myanmar? Um, and particularly because you're not Buddhist, and there are many people there who are not.
I think since the majority of um, people in Myanmar are Buddhist,
Mm.
they view they the monks should not be beaten or touched like that. And so once they started protesting and they saw that the police and the military were using force on them, people started to really see how wrong it was. And I think it really motivated them to protest as well and join the cause. And I think it is the religious sense as well, because there's always leaders in religion, whereas in Christianity, maybe we would view pastors as they view the monks. So the fact that their leaders and people that they respect are going up and fighting for their people, I think that really moved their hearts.
Great. And so now let's start talking about the film, and then we'll get from the film to today. So before we get into anything else about it, from your point of view and your sense of history, is there anything that's historically inaccurate or misrepresented, or is sort of gives you an impression that's different than than what you were aware of, than what you know of?
I, as a child, was very isolated. We lived in a rural village. There was only one TV in the whole village,
Hmm.
and the only thing they showed was DVD movies, and we treated it like a movie theater. So we would go to their house
Hmm.
and pay and things like that. So we didn't know much about history. We were very isolated. And so seeing the film, it was very interesting for me. I learned a lot as well about my country and what was happening. And so I think during that time, many places around Burma were so isolated. They didn't have technology, they didn't have media to see those things. So they didn't really know much of what was going on. So we only ever experienced the military when they would go through our villages, and the way they treated us. That's what we knew about them. And so what we experience is we have like village chiefs. They're kind of like the mayors. And so people would not even volunteer. People would have to be forced to work as the mayor because the military treated them so bad. So if um, the military were coming and they send a person ahead saying, "Oh, we're coming, you need to come get our stuff and receive us," and things like that, and they did not gather people enough in time, they would beat them, they would make them do terrible things. So that is like the experience we have with the military, and we didn't know much about people protesting.
And I have to say, it's really fascinating to hear you talk about having DVDs as your only sense of television, and in a world where media is all around, that's what you have is. And what kind of, I'm just curious, what kind of DVDs were there? Were they Hollywood movies, or were they Asian films, or what were you seeing on those screens?
We saw various movies, mostly the popular ones. So we saw Korean dramas. We saw like a lot of action movies, such as like Van Damme and Sylvester
Still on.
Stallone.
Still on.
Yeah, yeah. And like Jackie Chan and things like that, and Bruce Lee. So we saw various, we saw both Asian and kind of the Hollywood as well.
And what did you think of those films? Because when you think of, say, a Stallone film, and sometimes the Asian communities are not treated very well. It's like they all die. And I can imagine, watching those and saying it's like people who are Native Americans looking at cowboys and Indians films and sort of getting this warped perception of reality.
We didn't really think much of it. We just saw these movies as like the highlight of our week, I think. And so we would like follow their actions in the movie. Like Bruce Lee, he would do like this a lot, and all the male in our village, they would all do that every single time. So we didn't really focus much on the content. I don't think it's we were just excited to be able to see something.
Oh, it's wonderful. Just great. Thank you. Um, so one of the things it seems to me where this film starts off is that scene when they're in the bus and she says, "I knew today would be different." And then the woman says, gives her money to pay for the bus, and he said, "Oh no, it's twice as much." And the idea that that the military government, in their greed, um, doubled the amount for gasoline, and so the beginning of this whole revolt is about money, and and
Yes.
and then it begins. So from what you saw in the film, I mean, I know that you don't remember very much of it. Um, and do you remember any of what happened during those during that time, or did anybody tell you about what was going on during that time?
As we were during that time of the protest and the uprising, that was just when we started when we arrived in the US.
Right.
And so we were not really aware of anything. We were just kind of trying to settle in. And these are events that I suddenly realized after what's been happening in Myanmar in recent events. And so I started learning about these, the 1988 and the 2007 and more.
So let's start with 1998, because that's before this film starts. So and they sort of talk about that there were things that happened before in the very beginning. So what happened in that first set of what sort of caused it and what sort of happened?
Also in the 88 uprising, it was very much of the same reasons. It was because of the military rule with with money and corruption, and mostly the students started it. Like the students at the university,
Yeah.
they realized that this is wrong, and so they wanted to protest against the military.
And in that case, they came in and the military just came in and kind of mowed them all down, right?
Yes.
And the military just sort of stopped that in its heels. And what makes the 2007 different is that the military wasn't able to squash it so quickly. And I think that's to me, it's all about the video got out. And to me, that to me is the sort of, the heroic moment, and the thing that I love about this film, other than just sort of letting us know what's happened, is there were all these people with these small camcorders. And by the way, I have to just take a moment, as all of you were watching it, didn't you feel both a nostalgia for those really old camcorders and those little, and just the little tapes, and it just seems like so forever ago that there had all of these things, and now your phone can do all of that, and the idea of what a phone can do as visual evidence is such a dramatic and different thing. But what was really important was that this group of people, um, really at the risk of dying, um, decided that they would document what they could, and they hid the cameras, and that they were technologically savvy enough to beat a strong military government that had plenty of money to try to figure out who they were. In an impressive kind of environment like that, the idea that you could remain anonymous while having that camera and getting that material out, was pretty amazing. And in the film, I don't know how much you sort of picked up on this. So they had two ways of getting this stuff out. They either would put it up on the internet and try to get it out through the internet, which to me is much more risky, because if the military leaders were smart enough, they probably could have traced all of that. But then they said they got some videos out by having trusted sources like get them out. Very much, I would assume, Par, like not too dissimilar to your experience of leaving in the middle of the night and getting stuffed into a truck and having a very long and difficult journey. What it took to get these VHS tapes, or these, whatever they format they were, like out, and then getting them in a way that they could actually show up on CNN is it's a miracle. I mean, it's an absolute miracle that these people who are being incredibly oppressed, that all these things are happening, and that people around the world could find out that information in a time when, just to remember that no journalists were allowed in, and there were no journalists in the country. So there was no other way to find out what was going on except these tapes that were able to get out either through the internet or through people taking them. What an amazing sort of document of history that is just really incredible. And then, so as the story sort of evolves, you see them start shooting, and they're starting shooting protest here and there. And, they're worried constantly through the whole film. They're worried about getting caught. In fact, of course, one of the major character has to go to Thailand because they're afraid that he's going to get picked up, and has to stay out there while everything else is going on. But he was clearly able to do that. And I don't know if you remember that moment when as things are going on, he's got two leaders holding phones together where so they can talk to each other. I mean, and the idea that the filmmaker can get these moments of history in the making, is just like absolutely incredible, right? And this is like from Danish TV, the crew that was going down and making that film. Truly a remarkable like access to history as it's being made, which I thought was just really, really, really incredible. And then you have the moments when the monks decide that they're going to do something. And as you said, the monks are really kind of important, and you can see the reverence that the monks had. And I thought it was really fascinating how in the very beginning, when they're shooting the monks are saying, go away, no, 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 don't shoot here. And
Mhm.
then, and then eventually the monks are talking to the people making the films. I mean, they're very much like at the center of getting the word out about what's going on. And then you get from that moment to the moment um, when a monk is lying in the water dead, and you have the image of it. And that image gets shown around the world. And that's a very powerful moment. It's a very, very powerful moment, not just in a film, but also in terms of human rights. And it's just like an important piece of history. And this film, which is, shall I, mostly forgotten about. Like I haven't heard anybody talk about this film in 10 or 15 years. But this film like documents something in such an incredibly profound way that is really kind of instructive of what happens when people are impressed, although, doesn't always work out so well. Um, so Roseanne, what's your question here? Let me see. It's in the chat. How did they make the connection with Norway to broadcast the info to the world? Okay, so here's what I thought. It was Norway, not. So I think if I remember correctly, there were somehow the footage got to somebody in Norway. It's like they were helping getting it out. So I think, and I don't know for sure, but I think that's where it was coming to. So because that was coming up through there, somebody sort of knew about it, and then decided to make that film. And Scandinavian public television has been very good at making very good, serious documentaries and putting funding into them. Just one of those things that most people don't know. So now we get to where you can really help us. So this film ends when things are not going very well. What happens after this?
So as I watched the film and I learned about the 1988 as well, I just saw how similar the situation was to what is happening now. In the film, they set the curfew and they said no more than 5 people can gather, which is the same as what they did in recent events. And I feel like history keeps repeating itself. And so even after 2007, even after thousands of people died, still no change to the government really happened. And even in the 1990, when they allowed elections to happen, the NLD, the National League for Democracy, Aung San Suu Kyi's party, they gained over 81% of the votes. That's a huge proportion of the votes. And now they had the majority of the votes again, and here's the military saying, no, it's fraud. So they are afraid. They are afraid to lose their power. So I think they keep trying to, they give the people a little taste of democracy and then they take it right back because they don't want to lose their wealth and their position.
I just want everybody to realize, I'm sure when you all watch this film, and as soon as the military said, "Oh, election fraud," like everybody said, like, "Gee, where have I heard that before? Like, where have I heard that before today?" When Georgia is passing all of these rules claiming this election fraud, and the person who was pushing the election fraud case just in a court case said, "Oh, you shouldn't believe anything I say. It was clearly wrong." And it's like this is a worldwide phenomenon of people that have power, and when they clearly, just like Trump is not, there are more people who dislike Trump than liked Trump. There were more people who were against the military than for the military. And again, you have a situation where you have minority rule, and a situation where it was really hard to have that change of power. And luckily in the United States, we actually did have a change of power. And it almost came to a very violent situation, but we did have a somewhat peaceful transfer of power. And hopefully things will get better. So we should talk specifically about what's happening now, and how the beginning of that. But I think we have to talk about this political party and the leader of this party, and her voyage of being held for the great work that she's done, and then her blind spot in not supporting human rights all the way.
Yes, I am right now. It's a lot of let's just say Western people, Western countries, criticized her after the Rohingya But it is very different from how she is perceived from the people in Myanmar, because we still view her as someone who is like respectable, someone who loves us, who cares for us. And I think one of the reasons why she sided with the military was because she was afraid of this military control happening, but eventually it still happened. So I'm not really sure what her thinking and what happened behind the doors, but I really do think that it was because she wanted the country to be safe and she didn't want the military to take over again if she said anything bad about them. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably true. I think that her intentions were quite noble, hoping to save, you know, bad things from happening, but they did. So after 2007, when is the next time that there is somewhat of an uprising, and what is that about?
after 2007, I only really know the major events. And after 2007, the recent events after after February, when the military took over, is kind of what I am more aware of.
Okay,
Uh,
so before February, who
mhm.
was running the government?
The So it was the NLD, so Aung San Suu Kyi's
Aung San
party.
Suu Kyi's party was running, and were things going well?
Yes, yes.
And you know, it's like there was money coming in, poor people were being somewhat taken care of, things were going well. And then what happened in February?
In February, the military started kind of arresting the NLD leaders, the
Hmm.
people that won the election. And after that, they started, when people started protesting, they started doing the curfew and
Hmm.
no gatherings and things like that. They blocked the roads, they sprayed them with water hose,
Hmm.
and eventually led to firing rubber bullets and then real life bullets. Um, so I think, to me, the military has no way of changing unless there is someone there to take them down. And so in recent events, there have been lots of youth going into militias to try to hopefully raise an army big enough that can counter the military. So I really hope that does go well, but I am afraid to see what a civil war would do to the country and the civilians.
Hmm. So there really is a growing armed militia that's evolving. And how long has that been going on? Is that something that's within the last year or two, or has it just been after February that that's starting to happen?
So there have been militias in the minority groups.
Hmm.
So uh, each of the minority groups are not treated um, fairly by the Burmese military.
Hmm.
And we have been oppressed for a really long time. So there's like Kachin, Goran, us Chin people. We are called more of the, we say Tlang people. Tlang can mean mountain or hills.
Hmm.
As we know, it's called the Chin Hills. So we are the hills people, the mountain people. And so each of us have had our own militias, but with the Kachin and Goren, there have been constant um, armed fights, but we don't really hear much of them because I guess they're not as in a big scale, but there has been constant throughout the years, constant war, not really war, but
And So one of the things, getting back to the film, that was important was that there were no journalists allowed in the country during the 2007 time. How is the word getting out now? Are journalists allowed in? Are there like citizen journalists sort of documenting this? How is the world finding out about this, and who are the people that are reporting on it?
So what I have seen is many people, there are journalists and regular people. They post on Facebook Live the most. So they would go live and they show us what is happening in real time. So for us, 8, 8 p.m. right now is around 8, 9 a.m. for them. And so they start really protesting around 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. And so during this time is really when we start seeing their lives and we see what's happening to them. Um, right now, as of yesterday and the days prior, they have done a mandate where nobody leaves their homes. So the streets are empty. Nobody is working, nobody is going outside. It is a form of protest as well. So they're saying we're not going to do anything. But there have also been cases where these young youth, these young men, they're fighting back against the police and the military. They're throwing rocks. They have like slingshots and things like that.
Yeah, it seems like a kind of a David and Goliath kind of thing. Where it's,
Yes.
and um, yeah. So are the monks involved in things as it's going on now? And do they have a role in this, or are they sitting this one out?
I have not really heard about the monks, but I have seen various groups. So there's workers, let's say social workers, they protest in a group, and um, medical workers, construction workers, security, firefighters. They did at one point where they each protested in their group. They would walk with the banner saying what part of organization they're from. And there are Christians. They would kneel down, pray on the street, like everybody would kneel down and they would pray. And there are people that are singers. They would, in the protest, they would have kind of a stage and microphone, and they would sing songs and lead the people in that.
So do you think that any kind of real change is possible? With the military having historically so much control, and having, was it 20 or 25% of the assembly seats written into the Constitution, and having so much wealth from having so many years of being in power, um, what are the chances that some sort of a change can really happen?
I think as of right now, this is probably the most um, advanced sort of protest that we've had. There is basically the whole country is joining in on the protest, whereas the other years it's a couple of thousand. So I think this is really the time that they could make a change if they continue to stick together and not give up, just keep united, keep a united front, and um, whatever way they're trying to protest, keep protesting against the military. And I don't know if the military will step down willingly. I highly doubt that will happen.
I don't think so.
So
They're
I
not
think,
going away unless they have to.
yes. So I really think that the youth really has to work hard, and hopefully the militia will come together. Each group of people will come together and have a united front and fight against the Burmese military.
So, what in your mind, what would, if the military could be defeated, or if these protests work, what kind of structure, what would it look like there?
I think if the military were to be defeated, I think the country would be in a much better state. So if we had democracy again, where these leaders such as Aung San Suu Kyi are in charge, it is crazy to me that just because of her, they made this rule that, oh, if you married someone foreign, you can't be president or things like that.
Just wait a minute. We'll pause that for a second, because that is such a bizarre thing to do. They made this rule that said if your children, or is it children were not born in there, you couldn't be. It's like, it's just like, it's just kind of crazy. You wouldn't think that people could do that just to make a law to say that you can't be a leader. Insane.
Yes, they just try to find any way they can to stop her and her party from um, gaining more popularity and gaining the actual seat.
And do you think that she really can prevail in this struggle?
I really hope so. I really can't say anything because she was put on house arrest for 15 years.
And
And
people don't realize that house arrest for 15 years. Let that sink in for.
in the film, we saw too how
Yeah,
her only appearance outside was when the monks went and they saw her from the gate. And
yeah.
it's just crazy how someone can be left alone in a house and not have any contact with anyone. I think if it was anybody else, they might go insane.
Yeah.
Just them by themselves. It is for 15 years, it's imaginable.
So it's been a long time since you've been back to your birthplace. Do you want to go back if things change?
I definitely do. Right now, I think for me, I really want to make a difference in my home country. Um, I want to go back and help the people develop and progress as well. I see how there right now things are improving, but not by much. I see how other countries have progressed in the last 10 years, whereas in my country, nothing much has changed. And I really think that the only people that can make a real difference is the people that are in different countries right now. They're studying different things. So I really hope that we all do go back and be the difference in our country.
So, having said that, will you tell everybody what you are studying now and why?
I am a pre-med student right now, and from my experience, I saw how we lived in poverty. There were no hospitals in our village. We really had nothing. So if someone was sick, they would have to go to different cities, like really far. And most of the time, we did not have the money. So a lot of deaths that could be prevented were not due to our situations and our poverty. So that is one of the reasons why I want to give back and help.
So you want to be a doctor, not so you can live in North Dallas and make a lot of money, but you want to be a doctor so you can go home and help people who really need it. That's truly, truly wonderful. Well, Tommy, you've been quiet over this because I haven't asked you anything. Um, how much do you know about what is going on from your perspective from the Asian Film Festival?
I mean, the Asian Film Festival has nothing to do with what's going on in Burma. We didn't do it.
You caused it
Um,
all. It's like
but
you called off the festival and everything went bad.
no, but we're definitely aware of what's going on over there. We're keeping an eye on it, and we're kind of keeping up to date with what's going on as individuals. For sure, I know I am, and it's I can never. I never stop no matter where I am. I never stop thinking about, like, I mean, maybe it's the teacher in me, Bart, you might understand. I never stop thinking about the repetition of history and how easy it is for something like that to happen anywhere. And how a lot of us, especially Americans with American exceptionalism, consider this something that could never happen here. And I think that that's just ignorant. And I feel for the people of the country. I feel for all the people of the country, the Rohingya as well. I know they are part of that country as well, and that's all of that is a tough nut, and it's hard decisions that people are making across the board, and it's hard to hear. It's really hard to hear, considering how far they came in the last few years, to see it slip back. Now that said, it's not impossible. I mean, Tunisia did it. Tunisia pulled themselves out of military rule, and are still doing okay for now. And hopefully they will continue to still be doing okay. Now that does remind me, there were a lot of women involved in the Tunisian revolution recently, and there's been a lot of women involved in the American stuff over the summer, the BLM riots or the BLM movements, and all that other stuff going on. And that's fantastic to see. And I love seeing that a whole community is getting involved. Now, when I watched this film, I could literally count the women I saw on screen participating on like one, maybe two hands. And there were thousands of people, I mean, between the military and the protesters. Par, I wanted to ask, it was on my short list of questions. What is the involvement of women in the country as a whole during these protests? Now, I know that Tunisia is an out there example, because as far as that part of the world, they have some of the most even participation of women and men in that part of the world. But that might not be the case in Burma. So let us know. How's that work?
Yes, so for most of history, we are very, the women are very pushed down. They're kind of like made as housewives, and even in politics, they don't really think like women should be involved. Even in our community now, there has been a lot of changes, and ever since we have arrived in other countries and seen women being involved, there has been some people who think that, oh yes, women should be more involved, like, oh, we need more women voices. But there are still people in the older generations, our elders, who still think that women are less than men. And so I think that is one of the reasons why in the past protests, we didn't really see women. But right now, women, they are there, they are out there, they're protesting as well. Even mothers are carrying their baby and protesting as well. So I was really moved to see all those women show up.
And
Yeah,
you also
that
have
is
a
moving.
woman as the head of the resistance.
Sure, I did count her on my 10 fingers.
Okay.
I did count her.
She's a large life presence.
Yeah, there you go. So I did have one more question I want to sneak in before, while Bart's letting me talk. Was there I heard that I could hear the emotion in your voice as you were describing your transfer to America. It was hard to miss. It was hard for me to not be emotional watching that documentary, and even just thinking about what's going on over there right now. That said, I'm a very emotional person, so beside the point. Was there an image? Is there an image? Is there a feeling? Is there a thought that just like keeps hitting you and keeps coming back from your transfer?
Um, I think there were so many. There were so many that I experienced, but I think one was the truck one. It was one where I cried a lot, and then another one was when we were in Thailand and I was separated from my mom. So my mom and my brother were put in a different house, and then my sisters and I were placed in another. And me and my sister, we were just children. She was 9, I was 7, and so they let us play outside because we kind of look alike. Thailand people, there isn't much difference in the Southeast Asian people. So they were like, oh, the police wouldn't ask them questions and stuff. And I remember it being really hard, just being left out there, not knowing anything. And whenever the police walked by, we would like shiver in fear. And I didn't know where my mom was. Like at that age, like your parents are the ones you rely on the most.
Mm.
And I would just cry. And then every time the police would walk by, we would just pretend like, oh, we don't know anything, just look away. And and the food too, we weren't really used to their food. And so like when I saw their food, I didn't want to eat it. And so we were like hungry for a really long time as well. So we were basically starving, and I was missing my mom. So I think those two were one of the were two of the situations in our journey that I could never forget.
Well, I'm sorry
Par,
that was something you had to experience, Par. Yeah.
have you gotten used to eating cookies yet?
Yes, yes. As you can see from my appearance.
So it didn't take very long to do that. You know, thinking of the sort of scope of this and then thinking about where we are now, um, there's a very hopefulness that change could be in the air. But at the same time, you have this kind of worldwide move away from democracy, that military and, you know, strong men around the world are starting to take control of things in a way that we haven't seen in, you know, in a long time. But I do think, because you have a charismatic leader for the opposition, that so much of the country is behind. And I think that so many people are fed up, but I think there really is a sense of hope that just maybe this time things could be slightly different. And maybe there could be a real free state, and, you know, get the military away from control, and maybe rewrite the Constitution and take that 20% out and have a new clause.
Yeah, you probably don't have to get approval from like 45 states like we do, so
Yeah,
it might be a little easier, maybe. I don't know.
they probably don't have a filibuster law to do.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah,
Um,
well, one of the reasons why the military took over was also because Aung San Suu Kyi's party were trying to change the constitution. So
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why they,
Powerful men do not like having their power taken away.
yes.
That
yes,
seems to be a thing.
yes. Sound familiar? Yeah. Um, Well, Tommy and Par, thank you so much for this incredible evening, and it's so wonderful to hear your inspiring story. It just really, I think, touches all of us, and we are so glad that you made that difficult journey, walking so long, being stuffed in the truck, being away from your mother for a little bit, being scared, making a very difficult journey to come here, and to come here to learn how to be a doctor and go back and serve. It's just a wonderful thing. It just really wonderful. We thank you so much for being here and really enlightening us to your story and to the story of your people. It's just been really wonderful. And
Yeah,
Tommy,
thank you, Par, for sharing with us. That's I appreciate it.
So much. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and this platform. I'm so grateful as well.